use the bell to leave all of our troubles, our challenges, and even those things that interest us and stimulate us. We leave all of those in the past as we enter into the present moment a little bit more free of past burdens, of things that have held our attention over the past few hours, days, weeks, and months. Just emerging like newborn babies onto the earth. That point before the conditioning begins. That point where there is no past, where there is no future, where there is just now. We'll divide today's practice into 3 parts. That of arriving, the first part, and then perhaps a visualization. And then maybe a body scan. But on each one of these parts, all of these parts, they correspond so closely to the practice of arriving, because that's all this practice is about. Noticing how, even though the body is here seated on these chairs and cushions, in front of this computer or tablet at this particular moment, called the now, we find ourselves drifting sometimes into the past, sometimes into the future. And arriving is simply the aligning of the mind with the body, which soon we will discover can only be in one place, at one moment, one time. And this present moment, something so much larger than anything that can be conceived or created through the mind. Our life has been made up of countless present moments. When we were 3 years old, there was a present moment, and when we were 5, and when we were 5.5, and 10, and 16, 5 minutes ago, visited us as a present moment. This is a practice where we step outside of the mind, which creates time. We step outside of the horizontal line where there is a past and a future and a middle or in between, and move into a vertical line of nowness. Let this vertical line be your spinal column. Find your spinal column. Stretch the top end of your spinal column upward. Push the tail end of the spine downwards onto your chairs, onto your cushions. Find yourself gaining those few millimeters or even centimeters or inches of height. Find the way in which your shoulders sit in relation to the spine, how your head balances itself on the top end of the spinal column, how the tail end rests on the pelvic bone, and those lower parts of your body that are in contact with chairs, cushions, mats, and so on. More fully arriving, finding those points of contact between your body and the surface underneath you. This may include the surface of the chair or the cushion. This may include the carpet or the flooring underneath your feet. Notice your growing ability to distinguish between the story that you live in and this moment where you are simply sitting, possibly lying down, breathing. We want these practices to be as practical as possible in our day-to-day lives. There are times, moments when we may be rushing from one place to the other, trying to catch up with appointments. An unexpected bill may have turned up, a diagnosis, a health diagnosis, whether for ourselves or someone we care deeply about. The mind begins to wander into the possibilities, the diagnosis. We lose our alignment. And it is here with the ringing of the bell that You may be, whether you are walking, sitting, running, you bring yourself back. So instead of a person going through a particular challenge, you become a person who is walking and thinking about the story. You become a person who is sitting, breathing, and creating space and gaps between the present moment and the thought. You become a person who is sitting and thinking. Continue to land on your seats, on your cushions. Feel the privacy that you have. If you are remembering a conversation, a bill, a physical ailment, you are simply remembering it. Bring yourself onto these seats where you have a degree of privacy, a degree of comfort, because nobody is forcing you to sit in a particular way or stand in a particular way. Bring yourself back into this moment and watch as the thoughts begin to separate themselves from the witness, the beingness, the presence, the stillness. That is an intrinsic part of who we truly are. Find anything about the present moment that you may be complaining about. For these two are great tools that remind us that we have started to lose ourselves in the stories, comparing the present moment against the past or the future. Somehow deciding that the present moment should be different than the way it is. With the ringing of the next bell, embrace the present moment, this vertical line that always is. Up until now, we have awakened the surfaces around our body that remind us that we are on these chairs, wearing these clothes, having adopted these particular postures. Now, shift this awareness to the flow of breath. entering and leaving through the nostrils. Something that we quite consistently return back to in our practice. The witnessing, the observation, the experiencing of every breath flowing in and then out. Even releasing the need to place breath in accordance to some sequence of in and then out, focusing only on the in, focusing only on the breath out. A flow that has been with us since the day we were born, and therefore goes largely unnoticed, usually until breathing problems or such arise. Let us not wait for such issues to arise and simply treasure experiencing, welcoming every breath in, observing the way in which the air molecules interact with the sensitive skin around the nostrils and then the nasal passage, where there is moisture, down the throat, all the way into the stomach, pushing the stomach wall up as it stretches, and falls, magnifying the flow of the breath out through the skin within the throat, within the nasal passage, the nostrils, further outward down the upper lip, the breath is but an example of a tool that we can use to slow our thought process down. For to most of us, the breath is neither too stimulating, nor is it something we dislike. It's simply neutral. It just is. It has to be. And as we observe our breath, as we experience our breath, We no longer form new thoughts. All we are left with are the thoughts from this morning, last night, the days before, which become so much easier to simply observe as we remove stimulation with the phones switched off, the podcasts silenced, the web browsing temporarily paused, sitting more aware of our breath, possibly than ever before. And recognizing that the mind continues to move, labeling even this process as the thinking mind, momentum that has been picked up sometimes as recently as this morning, and sometimes as far back as our earliest childhood memories. Sometimes projections into the future that also stimulate the mind. Observing, watching. Most of us who join these practices, it's hard to separate yourself from at least some form of expectation of this practice. And some of us, we simply expect ourselves to feel a little bit more peaceful, maybe to slow the mind down, maybe even to still the mind. The way we experienced it when we watched that magnificent sunset, or when we were in our favorite nature spot, or looking into the eyes of a pet. There is a metaphor we can use that can help us to understand this process a little bit more. Imagine a car high up on a slope, and if you were to release the parking brake, or some of us call it the handbrake, and give the car a little push, initially it will move very slowly, slow enough that if you were to stand in front of the car, you would simply stop it with one of your hands, maybe even a finger, because it's barely started moving. You'd smile how easy, how light this was. Now imagine the same car halfway down the slope, or perhaps 3/4 of the way down, moving at a completely different momentum, speed. Most of us, let's consider ourselves to be beginners in this practice, shall we? As beginners, our minds are moving at a particular momentum, at a particular speed, either halfway or 3/4 of the way down the slope. All we can do is simply watch and observe and allow. But with the ringing of the bell, stepping outside of the car, here comes the bell. Try to remove yourself from the car. Observing the car that represents our mind. Once you find yourself outside of the car, your foot is no longer on the accelerator, and the car no longer increases its speed as it once did. But what we are a little bit more interested in is making our way up the slope so that we can catch our thoughts at its earliest stages before the momentum begins to grow. And this is why we call this a practice. Each practice brings us a little bit higher into that space, that gradient, where the mind, where the car is moving that little bit slower. And this is why many facilitators, meditation teachers, they ask us to observe and watch the mind. Because there is an acknowledgement that we do not want to fight against the momentum. We do not want to stand in front of a fast moving vehicle or car. Simply stepping to the side and allowing it to move, observing it, listening out for it, listening to it, the voices, the images. Now let each breath that we take in transport us a little bit higher Breathing in and out. Taking in another breath, moving yet higher up the slope, where the momentum is that little bit slower, and you are beginning to notice as the car whizzes by, as the thoughts move past. And this next breath, bringing us to that point of origin, right at the beginning of the slope. Breathing in as deeply as you can. Breathing out as slowly and as gently as is comfortable. Where everything is moving so much slower. Noticing your ability to place a finger enough to stop the momentum at its early stage. Placing your palm, or maybe even just letting the car bump up against your knee or your shin, stopping, resting in the stillness, in the silence. Beyond time, beyond pasts and futures. And as we move beyond the mind, we begin to get glimpses into a space of kindness that transcends form. For it is the mind that exists within time, with its likes, dislikes, has created that which we refer to as our personalities. Personalities that become identified with certain forms that of our bodies that seem so separate from the trees and the clouds and the mineral kingdom and those around us. The ringing of the next bell to release. This identification. Becoming life itself. That which keeps the heart beating, that which keeps every other heart beating, whether human or animal or otherwise, releasing the need to distinguish, or make sense of, as this practice simplifies itself into one where we simply observe and study ourselves sitting and breathing. Breathing for every tree, every leaf, every blade of grass. Feeling that connection between ourselves and the vegetation around us. That which we breathe out, absorbed by the greenery. That which is released by the plant world, absorbed into our bodies. Magnifying this profound experience called breath, called breathing. As we observe the mind, as we watch the mind, noticing the way in which it filters the sounds around us, the colors, the shapes, the lights around us, the smells, the physical sensations. contemplating on the words of Joseph Benner, who refers to the mind as a tool that helps us to translate the energy around us. How, if not for the mind, there would only be energy around us, atoms and molecules, incomprehensible, devoid of shapes and colors and so on, and textures. How the mind slows this energy down so that it can be fed to that organic matter within us called the brain. How the mind slows down the energy, slower, denser, until it is capable of being translated and interpreted within that which we refer to as our brains. Understanding how this practice can transform the way in which we experience all that is around us, from the people to the buildings, to the toys, to the foods and the drinks. Perhaps also understanding why it is that we are so deeply identified with our minds and these forms that we refer to as our bodies. The light beginning to shine, the light of wisdom, of understanding, moving through our foreheads, relaxing the skin, not only around the forehead, but around the scalp and the hair follicles. This light of wisdom moving through the bone and into the brain, with its neurons and electrical charges and so much more. This light making its way through the eyes, perhaps that perfect moment to release a single intention, that our eyes be from this moment directed to take into account, to focus on that which is nourishing, that which is beautiful, that which is kind, acknowledging its ability to look past that which does not serve us. The light moving through the sense of hearing, the ears, the eardrums, the tiny bones and nerves that make their way through the brain, translating sound, translating vibrating air molecules into sound. Releasing the next intention. Our ability to translate all that we hear in ways that are nourishing, healing, kind, beautiful. Releasing, not even hearing at times that which is hurtful, which does not serve us. Or perhaps seeing the silver lining behind all that is harsh and painful, translating it in such a way as to bring smiles and understanding. Such is the light of wisdom as it bathes our ears and our eyes and our brains, and soon our sense of smell and our sense of taste. The light moving through both arms, right and left, through the fingers and the hands. Releasing an intention that the hands filled with this light of wisdom, of understanding, of compassion, of kindness, better serve us by bringing more smiles and laughter into our lives. That these hands, these arms better serve those whom we come into contact with, whether human or animal or plant life or otherwise. This light of wisdom that is filled with balance and harmony, bathing every cell within our bodies, the digestive system, the hearts, and the various organs that sustain our bodies, all moving harmoniously, beautifully, kindly, lovingly. As our immune system begins to rise from within, balancing all of the imbalances that may have occurred through that identification with mind, past, and future, arriving into this present moment. And the pelvic region, down into the legs, both right and left, bathed by this light of wisdom, releasing. One more intention, that this light, having reached the feet and the knees, these feet that carry us, that they may carry us into spaces where we may receive more kindness, more love, more beauty, that these legs, these feet may carry us into spaces where we are given opportunities to share, to experience the kindness, the love, the beauty that has always been an inherent part of who we truly are. That part which is here, always here in the present moment. That vertical line moving through the spinal column, grounding you here, into the only moment, the present moment, a present indeed, a gift. And now the bell that will symbolize the beginning of our true practice, where we will bring this awareness, this kindness, this harmony, this balance with us through every word we speak, every sound we take in, every smell, every taste, every physical sensation and movement. releasing that need to move within time, ever present from moment to moment, breath to breath. Thank you, Frank.